Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? It's your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Football season is literally right around the corner. Today, we're talking KU. Our man, Michael Swain, who covers the Jayhawks for 24/7 Sports. We're talking KU football. They are actually also playing in week 0, so we'll talk a little bit about that today. But more importantly, we're just going to talk a little KU football and what this season looks like. Before we do, Michael, hey, man, thank you for giving us your time. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. It definitely feels weird sitting here August 19th and it's a game week, but
Right.
we'll take a week 0. It's going to be super interesting, I think, this weekend, seeing what it's like. And, for KU, K-State, Iowa State, right? 3 bye weeks over the course of a season. That's a different dynamic as well. So it's going to make for a pretty interesting football season.
It is. I was going to start off talking about some football stuff, but I don't think I'm going to. Let's just start off talking KU in general. A lot of things going on at KU right now. New stadium, which I think a little bit, Michael, contributed to some of the stuff last season, KU not really having a home field advantage. I know it was in Kansas City, and I know it was fun, but it's not the same as playing at home on your own campus. A lot of things going on. New stadium, new players, new offensive coordinator. There seems to be a little bit more of a buzz, especially with new recruiting, with the recruiting that's going on, a little bit of a buzz, even coming off of somewhat of a disappointing season. That's different than in years past, Michael, as far as KU football is concerned.
Yeah, well, I think context is always important. 5-7 for Kansas 6 years ago, right? That would have been a good season.
Right.
But obviously the context of last year matters, right?
Yeah.
KU returned a lot of players. They didn't have a home field or a home stadium to play in, right? They played 2 games at Children's Mercy Park, an MLS stadium, and then the other 4 at Arrowhead. And it just was a disjointed year. You mentioned the new coordinator. Jeff Grimes was KU's offensive coordinator last year. That hire did not really work. Now Jim Zabrowski was promoted. He has been KU's quarterbacks coach. And then you really work your way kind of through the course of the offseason. The coaching changes kind of happen in the winter. And then KU really starts to get some, in-state recruiting momentum heading into kind of January and February-ish. And then a lot of the stuff with the stadium starts to really get finished. And then now, you look at game week, and if you're around the stadium, you really see that it's real and that KU's getting ready to play a football game. We got to see a practice inside the stadium about a week or 2 ago. And man, turf is soft, but it's a very different feeling having watched so many practices in the old booth where it's a very gradual, kind of bowl, where now it's very steep and feels very much like the stands are on top of you. So it should theoretically create maybe a different type of home field environment. It reminds me of some of the other stadiums I've been around too. In the old Big 12, I think about Oklahoma, where you look at that second deck that they had and how vertical it is, how on top of you it feels like.
Yes.
And, KU has definitely added some of those elements. And now, obviously, Travis Goff continues to talk about the fact that, 2/3 of the stadium are done. Now it's all about phase 3. And obviously, David Booth's $300 million donation, 75 of that goes towards getting phase 2 moving. And obviously KU's had some positive developments on the local front with some star bonds and other kind of incentives that will help them get phase 2 done. So, there is just so much going on, and that's not even talking about now, you got a whole basketball team that's basically brand new. Like in terms of the life of a KU beat writer, like it's very busy. It's exciting. But it's good stuff, right? You're not talking about controversy, right? It's new things. And I think new things are always very interesting to talk about because, you don't know how it's going to play out. You don't know what it's going to feel like. And so all of it, I think, makes for a super interesting dynamic heading into the kind of this academic year as a whole.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, it's all good stuff. There's no controversy and stuff that's going around or surrounding or anything like that. It's good things. And I think that will go into the football season. Like you mentioned, and I guess I mentioned, not having a stadium. That means something, man. That's tough. I know I tried to downplay it last year, Michael, as, hey, they're playing in Arrowhead. The kids will be excited and fans will be excited. And I'm sure they probably were, but it's still not the same as me just walking into my own stadium, that's not the same thing. So I think the season may have taken a little detour because of that, and maybe not get the right kind of home and field advantage. But taking a turn and swinging it back to just football here, everything, in my opinion, with KU, it kind of started with most teams. It starts with the quarterback. Jalen Daniels didn't have a great year last year. You mentioned it just didn't work. The new offensive coordinator last year, Jeff Grimes. Now you've got Jim Zabrowski coming in, quarterback coach. Jalen Daniels, I mean, obviously he's worked with him. I'm assuming he's a little bit more familiar with him. And how is he looking? Is he feeling more comfortable?
Yeah, I think so. And man, there are a lot of ways you can go here. So you look at what Jeff Grimes tried to do, and he was given basically, a Porsche, right? An offense that had been incredible, right? You look what Jim Zabrowski did. He called the bowl game for KU in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. That was just an insane game where Jason Bean, I think, threw for 400 something yards in that game. Like, it was an incredible passing performance. And then you go to last year, and Grimes is trying to do what he thought the KU offense was about and what like he had seen, but it just didn't really work. And obviously Jalen was rusty too. He did not go through spring practice in 2024. And then even then was a little limited to start camp, and then other wide receivers got hurt. And so just the timing was off, and he had a really poor start to the season. And then he kind of found a groove over the course of kind of the heart of the season. Arizona State kind of threw the Colorado game. And that, I think, is what you're looking at KU saying, okay, well, can you bottle that up? And that was the Jalen Daniels, I think, that everyone had seen in 2022, the start of 2023 before the back injury. And the chatter, at least during camp, has been that Daniels has been, number one, is locked in and as focused as he's been. He's been one of the first guys in the building. KU's a morning practice team, and he's been showing up at 5 a.m. to get his work in and start working towards the day and getting stuff done. So in terms of a work ethic and an attitude, he's been there. In terms of what he's shown during practice, right? People have spoken really highly of what he's shown. Now, I'm going to be that's all great. Let's see it against Fresno State in week 0. Let's see it against Missouri. Let's see it against West Virginia. Jalen has shown what he can do. It's always just been a question of consistency, and can he stay healthy? Last year, stayed healthy, was consistent. Is this the year he puts it all together? If he does, I think this team can do some really big things. And I think the fact that Zabrowski is the one calling the plays, a guy that's been working with Jalen for this is 5th year now, right, under Lance Leipold. And so I think I think the relationship that they have is comfortable. Jalen can talk about what he likes, what he doesn't like. Zabrowski's going to listen to him. And I think Zabrowski's also just a guy that's comfortable in his own skin. And so it's not going to be a question of feeling like he has to do something like maybe Jeff Grimes did last year. And so I think overall for KU, the quarterback position KU's going to go as far as Jalen takes it.
Sure.
But I think there's reason to believe and to be encouraged at least that this could be a year that Jalen kind of puts it all together.
Absolutely. Replacing Devin Neal is not going to be easy. I mean, the guy, obviously the all-time leading rusher at Kansas. I mean, he was special. But just looking at it, KU is not void of talent in that position. Having said that, is it going to be more of, hey, we got some guys back here and they can do some different things, more of a committee? Or is it, we've got a guy and that can be kind of the Devin Neal type, and then maybe another change of pace? Is it going to be that, or is it going to be more like a committee type of thing?
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of like a 1-2 punch. So Daniel Highshaw is back. A really good story for him. He's battled injuries during his career, dislocated the same hip twice. Like there's not many players that come back from that. And he's had some soft tissue injuries and had a shoulder injury. Like he's a guy that just has gotten banged up during his career. And a part of that is because his playing style, he likes to run through people. And I think that physicality is going to be, I think, a hallmark, of what KU's going to try and do offensively, where you're going to have this explosive passing attack, but also you're going to have running backs in Highshaw and a guy I'll get to in a second that can run through people. And so Highshaw's back. Getting him back is really important. He's in great shape. You look at him at practice, right? He's as lean as he's been. He feels like he's in a great headspace. And then KU also goes to Iowa and gets LeSean Williams, who was Iowa's leading rusher in 2023. Now, he's another guy that is just incredibly physical. You go watch his tape at Iowa, and he's running through people as well. So you've got this dynamic here where Highshaw has struggled with injury, struggled to stay available over the course of the season. Williams had an injury last year that kept him out, and then he ended up redshirting and then transferring. And Caleb Johnson obviously had a great year and is now with the Steelers. So KU's got these two guys that are kind of veteran college players, have kind of had their own injury issues over the course of their careers, but guys that when healthy have produced. So you feel good about the top two there and the physicality, and I think that what they can offer you. Highshaw's going to start, and he's going to be the guy that KU is going to talk about as like the quote unquote feature back.
Right.
LeSean Williams is going to get plenty of run, and I've heard some things about him during camp where, hey, he has been just as good as Highshaw's been. And that's a really big development for KU to have two running backs who you can rely on, because the Big 12 is physical and it's a long season. And can you have someone that if Highshaw's nicked up, he doesn't have to go out there and risk something bigger,
right,
and just to get you carries because you don't have other guys. And so those two guys are at the top, and then behind them, Johnny Thompson is a redshirt sophomore that's come along, a little bit more of a dynamic athlete, short burst, can make you miss, different type of player than Highshaw and Williams. So I think between those three, you've kind of got different contrasting styles, and you can kind of go to different things in different situations depending on what a game wants.
Gotcha. Now, we're talking about running the football here and being physical. Lance Leipold has talked about the offensive line, saying he's been impressed with what he's seen so far from the offensive line. Is that going to be a strength of KU this season?
So it all depends on maybe what you're going to qualify as a strength.
Okay.
Because if you look last year, KU had 2 NFL draft picks.
Right.
Logan Brown should have been drafted, but he got kicked off the team at Wisconsin, and that impacted things. Then Bryce Cabledew got drafted. So you had 2 tackles who were NFL players. And then on the interior, Bryce Foster will be drafted this next year after this season. So you had some serious talent. And then you had a longtime starter, Michael Ford, and then Kobe Baines, who's back. So you look at this year's offensive line, you're plugging in Calvin Clements at left tackle, a guy who will be an NFL player eventually, but he's a first-year starter. He's really developed as a leader, guy that people have been raving about since he stepped foot on campus. Like, I remember he was an early enrollee in 2023. And I want to say maybe second or third practice, it was like, okay, this kid he's going to be really good. Once he figures it out. So you feel good about left tackle, you feel good about center and right guard. The questions are left guard and right tackle. So going into camp, KU thought, Tavake Tuikolawatu was going to be the starter. That was kind of the projection. Well, that hasn't necessarily happened. Amir Herring, a former 4-star recruit coming out of high school, started his career at Michigan. He's really come on. He's been consistent. And so he right now, I think, is a guy that has the momentum. It's going to be an or situation on the depth chart. But right now, I think Herring does have the edge there. And then a right tackle, Nolan Gorska, program guy, has been around for a while. He got hurt during spring, so KU went out in the portal over the summer, brought in Enrique Cruz, a guy who started at Syracuse. Those two have been battling. It sounds like Cruz might have an edge. So this is an offensive line that's going to be different. It's going to be a new-look unit. Do I think it's going to come together well over the course of the season? Yes. I have some concerns about maybe some early season growing pains as you break in new players, right? It's a unit, and Bryce Foster missed kind of the first week or two of camp in terms of 11-on-11 work. So it's a unit that might take some time to gel. I don't know if it's from week 1 going to be a strength of the offense. I think by the time week 10 comes around, it could be. But that's going to rely on player development over the course of the season. And thankfully for KU, they really have shown that they can do that over the course of the year. And the way that they scheme things with Jalen Daniels and his legs, they're not going to ask those guys to go and block for 5 seconds, in passing situations. And scheme-wise in the run game, there's going to be enough misdirection where, hey, it's not going to be, can you go blow this guy off the ball consistently over the course of 4 quarters? So there are going to be different ways that KU is going to get around it. But I think generally it's a unit that by the time the season comes to an end, if KU achieves what I think they can, if you're talking about the top end of the spectrum, right, the unit's going to have to be a strength. Because they're going to have to play in those physical games. You're going to Iowa State. You're hosting Utah, your final 2 games of the year. You have to have a physical offensive line in those types of games. And so I think for KU, like, Jalen's going to determine a lot, but I think the offensive line is one of those units that over the course of the season could really improve.
Got it. So defensively, KU finished in the bottom half. I mean, just below the midpoint line last year in the Big 12. Who are going to be some of the playmakers? Are they starting over? Are they doing something different, maybe scheme-wise? What's KU going to look like this year defensively to improve on what they were last year?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be the same base look. So DK McDonald is now KU's defensive coordinator. Brian Borland retired. McDonald has a very interesting background. He's worked in he's worked some in some 4-down fronts, but he was a part of the Iowa State staff that created the 3-3-5 under Campbell. And then he went to the Philadelphia Eagles, had some success there. He was the defensive backs coach, obviously working with like Darius Slay, right? Really good players. So he's come back, and I think KU is going to continue to run a 4-down front. Maybe they'll occasionally do some 3-down stuff, but mostly 4-down front with the 4-2-5 look. So defensive end's a place where KU returns a starter in Dean Miller, but there's been some turnover, right? Justice Finkley came in from Texas, kind of a guy who's not the tallest or longest, but man, he's powerful. People call him a fire hydrant.
Right.
That's what some of the players have referenced him as. And so he's going to help KU strong side defensive end. They brought in Alex Bray from Illinois, a guy who played a lot at Illinois, is more of a 3-down guy in their 3-5 scheme. We can get into the nitty gritty of it, but basically he's going to play on the edge for KU now. And so a guy who's really come along though during camp is Leroy Harris. He was brought in. He was at Chattanooga. I think he was a Phil Steele FCS true freshman All-American last year. But he was brought in. They thought he was going to redshirt. And then he adds 20 pounds and during camp has just been making plays all over the place. So he's a guy that playing off the weak side could play off the strong side, but he's going to be a guy that they're going to expect to take a big jump. I'm not going to say like Austin Booker in 2023, but I think a similar type of like, man, they think this guy is going to be really, really good. So those are some of the defensive ends. Linebackers where KU has to have improvement. It's been a big issue for KU, poor linebacker play. You go back to the Arizona State game, you go back to the TCU game last year, just awful linebacker play, and it cost KU big time in those games. KU goes and gets Bengali Kamara from South Carolina, one of the best athletes I think KU's had at linebacker in a long time. For him, it's been a question of, okay, can he play physically down to down with the physical level in a 2-linebacker setup? And over the course of camp, I think he started to show that. KU also went and got Trey Lathan out of West Virginia. He was their starter at Mike last year. So you've got two guys that are major college experience. And Bengali playing in the SEC last year, like you watch some of the games in South Carolina before he got hurt, like he looked the part. It wasn't like, he's not up to snuff in this defense. So those two guys, I think, are going to be really, really important for KU. If this defense is going to improve and go from being a, bottom half defense to a top half defense, the linebacker play has to improve. They've got to get Joseph Sipp Jr., guy from Bowling Green. Can he be healthy over the course of the season? If so, you've got 3 guys there that have major college production under their belt, and you feel pretty good about the depth there, because then you've got some young guys breaking through in that room behind them. So I really think the linebacker play for KU is going to be a huge determining factor of where this defense goes, because if KU can all of a sudden, with their experienced defensive tackles, with the depth they have at defensive end, if all of a sudden you can get good linebacker play, well, KU's ability to stop the run just increased a bunch. And if you can turn teams into one-dimensional offenses because you're stopping the run, that makes life a lot easier on a secondary that's super young. So for KU, it's going to be some of the same stuff. I think schematically, some of the talking points have been that they're going to simplify some stuff. But, I've also heard that maybe some NFL schematics are coming in from DK's time at the Eagles. So it's a defense that in terms of the X's and O's, you don't really exactly know how they're going to be deployed. But personnel-wise, that I think there's some talent there that if coached up and put in the right positions, I think can really help this defense be better than it's been in recent years.
Gotcha. You mentioned earlier the schedule, and, Fresno State, they're not going to be a pushover. I mean, they won 6 games last year. They went to a bowl game. Fresno State's never a pushover, just throwing that out there. I think it's a good litmus test. KU, I think, should win the game, but they're not going to be the normal, team that people believe, you just first game going out there whipping them. No, especially opening up a new stadium. You think, let's just ease into this. KU's not really doing that. And then I know I think it's Wagner or something like that. And then it's Mizzou. Look, why they hadn't played, we can get into that at another time. It is what it is. But personally, I think it's great that they're playing again. And I know it means a lot to both sides. But for me, I think this is a big opportunity for KU because you look at their schedule, the early part of their schedule, Michael, they've got an opportunity here. And I think the Mizzou game is really big. Obviously, the Fresno game is the first game of the year, week 0. I get it. Trust me, I do. But the Mizzou game, not only for KU because, hey, we want to beat Mizzou, but for the Big 12 in general because, it's a SEC team. People think that Mizzou is going to be pretty good. Now, I'm not sure how good Mizzou is going to be, but that's just me talking. But I think it's a big deal. But just looking at the early part of the schedule, we'll talk about the Big 12 slate here in a quick sec. But the early part, if they can get that game, Michael, they got an opportunity here, don't they?
Yeah, and I mean, unless Fresno State, I mean, Jeff Long, I think he scheduled that game 2 months before he was fired. So he's just the gift that keeps on giving. Obviously, Fresno State, KU gets a little lucky. New head coach, Matt Entz, a guy who did such a good job at North Dakota State.
Yeah.
But they lost a lot of players in the portal, and they've had to bring some guys in, and so they're working through some stuff. KU's lucky that this is the situation, and it's not a Fresno State went 8-4 last year. They returned everybody, and they're ready to go. Like, that'd be a really tough opening game. I think it's not an easy opening game regardless.
No.
But, yeah, so, KU gets by Fresno State. They beat Wagner, and then it's Missouri. And I think my biggest question in that Missouri game, Missouri's defense is going to be really good. I think the most talented defense KU will play all year. The question is going to be what happens at quarterback for Missouri, and what does their offense look like? Because if this Missouri offense isn't very good, then all of a sudden, I mean, this could be a fist fight of a game. Right. And it's going to come down to the margins and who can execute in the fourth quarter when the stadium's going crazy. So, it's one of those where it's going to be a good test for KU and where this team's at, because it's going to be a good test for KU's offense because, again, the talent level in Missouri's front seven especially is elite. And it's really going to be a test for KU's offensive line. And so it's going to be an interesting game too, because I don't think KU is going to pull out all the tricks for Fresno State. I think they're going to do some stuff. Yeah, you can't go vanilla against Fresno State. You have to do some stuff schematically that's creative. But I think there's going to be some specific things that they save for that Missouri game. And I think that's what makes that game so interesting, outside of the fact that it's a rivalry game and the first time the two teams have played in over 10 years. So it's going to be a good litmus test for KU. If they lose, that's not the end of the world. Like, it's not a game I'm predicting KU to win. But if they do win, man, you're talking about a huge, huge confidence boost going into a super manageable first half of the Big 12 schedule.
Yes.
That's all you can ask for.
Exactly. And that's what I was getting at. The first part, you start looking at the schedule, you get by Mizzou, even with a good showing. I mean, West Virginia, Cincinnati, both at home, and then you go to UCF, which I'm not sure a lot of people think UCF's going to be very good. We'll see about West Virginia and Cincinnati. There's an opportunity there. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you get that, and then now, granted, things get a little bit more difficult. You go to Tech and K-State, but Oklahoma State and Arizona after that. Now, I think both of those teams are going to be better, but I'm not expecting a lot. Arizona, it seems like the head coach has already cashed it in. Jiminy Christmas. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I say it all the time, Michael. When a head coach is out in the parking lot with fans 30 minutes before a football game, that's incredible. I've never seen anything like that. So you got that going on there. Like I said, KU's got an opportunity here to do some stuff. I like the schedule. It gets tough at the end. Iowa State and Utah. I mean, it's tough at the end. I'm not saying it's all easy, and the Big 12 is crazy. I just think, first of all, I think that KU's past the point. That's why I was excited for KU fans, because they were disappointed last year. It'd be one thing if they weren't disappointed. Oh, you know what? We weren't good, ho-hum, blah, blah, blah. Or kind of like you said, 5-7 season 6 years ago, KU fans were happy. They were not happy last year. And I just have a feeling if they don't get to 7 or 8 wins, now granted, that's going to be tough. Don't get me wrong. That's going to be tough. But I feel like fans will be disappointed again. I think KU might be at that point to where they're like, look, the expectations need to be a little bit higher because we're a better football program.
Yeah, and I think baseline expectation, bowl game.
Yes.
Can you get back to a bowl game? That is, I think, the bare minimum. If it's not a bowl game, it's a big disappointing season, and there's going to be some questions.
Right.
Because, it would not be a good sign in terms of the trends of where things have gone. I feel confident KU will make a bowl game this year.
Right.
I'd be pretty shocked. Some things would have to go terribly wrong for KU not to. But talking about the schedule, what makes it so interesting looking at it is you play West Virginia at home. West Virginia's coming off of the Pitt game, backyard brawl the week before. KU gets a bye week going into that game because of the way this week 0 stuff works out. So scheduling wise, like that's a win for KU.
Yes.
And then they play Cincinnati. I believe Cincinnati then has a bye week going into that game. So that's going to be a challenging game. Sorsby at Cincinnati, right? Good quarterback. Going to be a question of Scott Satterfield. I've said this on our message board several times. I'm fading Scott Satterfield generally.
Yeah.
But then after that, okay, then you go play UCF, and it's like, okay, where's UCF going to be? Right. Do they have a quarterback? What is the talent level going to be like on offense? Because from what I've seen and read, right, they spent a lot of money on the defensive line rebuilding that. So that's not going to be an easy game, right? On the road, UCF. Depending on when the kickoff time is, right, you could see that one being like a night game at UCF, and that's not easy. And then after that, you go play Texas Tech, and that's going to be a tough game, really hard. KU has a tough time with Tech. I think they beat them once since 2001. I want to say I was just looking at that the other day. So that's a tough game. And then it's a bye week after that, and then it's K-State. And then that's really the Texas Tech games when it starts to get difficult. Then you play Oklahoma State, Arizona on the road. I'm telling you right now, that's going to be that 10 o'clock kickoff central or whatever it is, right? That's going to be the night game. So that's not going to be easy for KU. They were in that situation last year a little bit at it was at BYU when they had that late kick. So the schedule gets a little tricky towards the end. So KU needs to stack wins early and get that momentum. And another trend I think we've seen with, under Andy Koldernicki in 22 and 23 is that KU really comes out hot to start seasons. You look at 2022, right? The way that they blew teams out of the water early, they get by Iowa State, they're 5-0, and then game day comes to town. Jalen gets hurt, right? Things become a little tougher. So they started the season well that year. Then you look at 2023, they start the season well, right? They beat Illinois, they beat BYU at home, then they go I think they played Texas close and then beat UCF, or maybe they flip-flop those two games, but they started fast. And then when teams start to get a feel for what KU's doing offensively, then there's a little bit of a lull and it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. And you saw some games where KU's offense wasn't as consistent. So for KU, like with Zabrowski and Matt Lubick being the co-OC, those two guys being the leaders of that kind of meeting room, you're going to see some creative stuff early in the year. And it's going to be a question of when kind of that Tech K-State game comes around, what sort of then counters can KU use? And so I think really getting that momentum early is going to be really important for KU to be able to get all the way, kind of get the bowl eligibility stuff done, maybe before the month of October. And then you can go play and go have big swings in November and try and make yourself a Big 12 title contender.
Gotcha. Well, Michael, man, thank you very much again for your time. I know it's busy early week this week with week 0 with the game coming up, but I'm sure we'll have you back on again. And just want to thank you for your time, man. Just for anybody who doesn't know already, where can people find all the stuff that you do?
Yeah, they check out fog.net or kansas.247sports.com. And thanks again for having me on. Always fun to catch up and chat. And yeah, looking forward to a fun college football season.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving us your time. And thanks everybody again for watching. We appreciate you. We will be back soon. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.